now 3 o'clock. And we're going to start the Andrew Wildman, Simon Furman panel. Has everyone been sitting here, or do we want to go over the rules or stuff again for the stuff? I'll go through it again because I'm getting late on. Basically, the first half we're going to run, basically, raise your hand. These gentlemen will point to you. You stand up, you ask your question, keep it loud and pronunciate and stuff, and they'll answer it. And they'll just keep popping around. And toward the latter half, we're going to start setting up the line here. Have your autograph card ready to go. Basically, Mr. Davidson's going to be punching it for you. Depending on the crowd, it's 1 or 2 autographs per person, please, to get the maximum amount of people in line. You step on, say hey, step off, and we'll just try to get everyone in here, okay? Any questions? All right, let's commence.
With the questions, can we just make them specific as to who you want answered, though? So, I mean, if it's an Andy question, can you say this is Randy or me or whatever?
Good point.
General,
Or else they'll start wrestling up here, and it's not a pretty sight, folks. It's not good. So have fun, okay? Good luck.
First of all, let me just say thank you for being here. We appreciate you being here. Okay, but we'll deal with that. Question on the annual you did. Did you mention anyone? Another time and place?
Yeah.
Can that be reconciled into the P1, P2 continuity?
No, I think that would fall into what either Marvel or DC called what if or else worlds. It's a possible future, and it was just fun to explore for a brief story. Because at that time, we had no idea there was going to be a Generation 2 or a Beast Wars, so it was just a bit of fun. Yes?
Your voice is really cool, but whose character you probably like to draw the most?
Who do I like to draw the most? Galvatron.
Explain why.
Explain why. He's reveal why. Well, Galvatron became my favourite initially because all the G1 stuff to draw was very kind of boxy. There had been artists before me who had handled that really well, but when I came onto the opportunity to draw a character who was a bit more human in their physique, allowed far more expression in the character, so that was a really cool one to draw.
Yes?
Hi. I was just wondering, for Mr. Wildman,
Yeah.
let's deal with the Generation 2. You only had very limited amount of pages within that. Were you approached as primary artist for that?
Yeah, well, it was mentioned when G1 finished. Obviously, I was looking for work then, and straight away they asked me to do G.I. Joe. So I kind of ran with that for a while, and then from there moved on to X-Men Adventures. Well, I was actually doing X-Men Adventures and G.I. Joe at the same time, so I was doing 2 books a month for a while. But by the time it came around to do G2, I knew Rob Tokar, the editor, very well anyway, and Simon was obviously up to write it. I mean, nobody else could write Transformers, really. So, yeah, it was kind of mentioned a couple of times, but I think the general feeling was that, my general feeling was that I'd moved on, and the thing is, when you work on a project, when you work on any book for more than a year, you become jaded. However much you liked that product initially, you do become a bit jaded, so it's nice to move on. I think the feeling, I mean, Simon will confirm this or deny it, I don't know, but I think the feeling was that they wanted to get a slightly different look. It was a new generation, and they wanted to go for something slightly different, so they went for that darker kind of thing. They were getting behind with schedules, so Rob Tokar rang me up and said, can you just do a couple of pages to pad it out? So yeah, I got Stephen Baskerville, and we did it. And it was fun to do, but it was just a brief sort of thing. You all right? Yeah, you boys.
2 questions for Mr. Furman. First question was, when you first stepped onto the American Transformers comic, it was pretty much a standard science fiction battle kind
Well, I'd already sort of done a similar sort of story vein in the UK Transformers. We already had, because with the UK Transformers, we printed the US material and we padded that out with new UK material that sort of still followed the basic storyline. But because we had no idea sometimes how the story would pick up in the US issues, what we had to do was spin off tangents from the main story. So after the movie came out, I used a lot of the movie characters and a lot of the future scenarios in the UK stuff. And a lot of that involved Unicron, Galvatron, and that whole sort of setup. So really, the sort of basic storyline was already there for me. So when I picked up on the US, it just seemed natural to bring together the continuity threads I had in the UK into the US mainline.
So you had Primus and Unicron, those ancient gods in the UK.
Yeah.
All right, second question. What is your unadulterated, unfiltered, no holds barred opinion of Jeff's Head 2?
It's one of those things where I'll do what Bob did and say, well, I can't really comment.
Aren't you a little kidding around?
But suffice it to say, when I got to do, thanks to editor Rob Tokar, the What If Death's Head story, where the old sort of trashes the original, there was a great deal of personal satisfaction in that. So that one to do as an answer, all right.
Questions for both of you. How seriously was Marvel considering a Neo Knights miniseries?
Well, I think Rob Tokar fought really hard for that one because the thing is that different editors at Marvel are obviously assigned different books, and they tend, I don't know, well, it is the same now, they tended to put books of a like nature with one particular editor. So you have an editor handling X-Men books, an editor handling Spider-Man books. And Rob kind of tended to end up with licensed characters. And so he was really keen to do something that was essentially originated, although it had come from Transformers, they were originated characters. So he fought really hard for that one, but I don't think it was ever taken that seriously.
I think the trouble by that point was that already the top brass at Marvel had decided Transformers had a very limited lifespan, and so anything spinning off from that they thought had the same potential, so
Yeah.
it was kind of doomed before it started.
Good as it was. Yeah. Go on, Breacher.
Mr. Furman, at the end of the G2 series, you left it basically on one heck of a cliffhanger. Did you have any specific plans immediately following that story?
No, is the answer. I mean, I tried to wrap up as much as possible. Again, it was one of those ones where ideally the story would have run and run, but we had to finish at issue 12, so the Swarm storyline had to be tied up. But it's rather too neat to end it on just a sort of cute, happy ending, especially as we had sort of picked up a kind of dark theme, and I really wanted to sort of leave that sort of hole of doom over the whole thing. If the chance of Generation 3 ever came up, we'd have got a chance to explore that. But no, I had no definites in mind. It was just a sort of, well, let's leave it with a teaser.
Over the back there. Yeah.
Have you ever considered working with people like Jim Lee or something?
Well, I mean, we'd love to work with Jim Lee, but whether he'd consider drawing Transformers again. But having said that, Jim Lee did do a cover for us.
Oh, Galvatron, there you go.
Two covers.
And I mean, that was a lot down to, again, our editor, Rob Tokar, who was just very good at talking people into doing things for us. But, I mean, yes, I mean, the obvious answer is it would be a pleasure to work with Jim Lee just because his artwork is so good, but it would have to be on a project of his sort of origination, I would imagine. I can't really see Andy or I tempting him back to sort of just straightforward drawing. So.
Later issue, what was up with all the parts and spit and slop?
It wasn't spit, it was oil. They were getting knocked around a bit. Well, the thing is that, like I said G1 stuff before. I treated it in a very mechanical, very boxy, very straightforward kind of way. The stuff that I've been doing on the UK Transformers comic, back then he had their own style. Jeff Senior's style was developed very, very early on. He had a very definite style. Other artists who were doing the British G1 stuff were following his style because it was so good. I mean, it really did handle Transformers very well. When I came onto the book, our influences were obviously different, so I didn't follow the style that he'd done. And when I had the opportunity to do the American book, they initially said, keep it mechanical, keep it straight lines, all this kind of thing. That was with the initial text. That was when Don Daly was doing it. When Rob Tokar took over, he said, "Hey, you can do what you like," you know. So at that point, I just tended to follow in the vein of what was really in vogue at the time, i.e. the X-Men books, Jim Lee's X-Men books. If you look at some of his early stuff, the last few issues he did of Uncanny X-Men and the first few issues of just X-Men, there's a lot of saliva going on there. There's all sorts of stuff, and that was what I was influenced by. I wanted to bring that to whatever I would have happened to be drawing at the time. It happened to be Transformers, and it was just a way of interpreting that. But it developed from there, because just to make it interesting for myself initially, because the thing, I mean, don't take this the wrong way, but the thing is that Transformers does have the potential to be a very, very boring book to draw. So you have to kind of inject it with something. The characters, as you read it, the characters are great fun to get into, but visually, it does have the potential to be boring. So I just put as much crap in there as I could possibly think of. I mean, there's like hair dryers and vacuum cleaners in the background, and then like the saliva thing, and they did get letters in from people saying, "Robots don't have teeth. What's going on?" You know. So you kind of think, yeah, okay, so I'll do even more teeth then. And there was actually one panel, I can't remember which issue it was, but it was on Cybertron when the whole planet was breaking apart and there was lots of winds and there was all sorts of stuff flying around. And there was a couple of characters, again, I can't remember who they were, who were walking along, carrying boxes. They were loading up a ship ready to get off the planet. And in one of those backgrounds, underneath the speech bubble, which was put over the top of it, there's a pair of false teeth flying by. But they got a speech bubble put over it, so you never saw that. So.
Mr. Furman, I was wondering, in the G2 comic, you killed off a lot of combiner team members. Did you dislike the concept of the combiner team for trying to kind of push it aside?
I think the artist disliked them. I basically found that with a lot of characters running around anyway, you know, it was just adding an extra complication in. And what we were trying to do with Generation 2 was just streamline the sort of cast of characters, so it wasn't quite as sprawling and the focus wasn't quite as sort of, you know, spread around. So I mean, it was just a case of, you know, let's sort of, you know, which ones aren't we using really? Which ones don't I want to use? And so we were just sort of trimming them down for a sort of, you know, hopefully a stronger main cast.
A bit of healthy culling going on there.
I mean, you know, by the end, I mean, I hate to think how many different Transformers there were, you know, sort of, that could do 2 or 3 different shapes and forms, and it was a bit daunting for myself and the artist, so it just seemed simpler to streamline.
Wasn't it kind of hard to write stories where, you know, you knew you were going to kill off the character, when generally anybody who ever died came back at some point?
Well, I mean, it's a nice guess out if you ever do want to bring them back, but I mean, I generally had a more or less rule of thumb that once they were dead, and you know, especially with the Unicron sort of wrap up, the ones who died there, well, except for Optimus Prime, but but you can't kill Optimus Prime, so
He's suffering for punishment.
Even if we continued, I'd never have brought, say, Scorponok back, because it would kind of cheapen the sort of the quite sort of, you know, pathos of his death. And you know, it depends on the character. If they're kind of just a throwaway background character, well, they can come back again. They've been rebuilt. But it just depends on their status in the story. And if their death had some sort of meaning to the story, then it just kind of, I don't like stories that then turn around on that.
Yeah, I'm wondering whatever happened to Derek the Anchor. Like, for the first couple of issues, he would be doing a full comic, and then at the end, he would be just doing the cover. And now he seems to have just disappeared off the face of the earth.
I mean, I don't know what Derek's doing now. The problem with Transformers was that while Derek was extremely talented and very dramatic with his artwork, he was also extremely slow. And so in the end, just to have a chance of getting a regular comic book out every month, we more or less relegated Derek to doing the covers, and he was quite happy with that. But, you know, I mean, the offer was always open for Derek to come in and draw a full issue if he wanted to. But in the end, it became more and more evident that he was never going to sort of, you know, be able to commit the sort of time he needed. I mean, he was another one who just went, you know, he laboured over this stuff. I mean, the first issue, I mean, it was something like 40-odd pages, the first issue of Generation 2. And, I mean, it took him, I mean, we had a good head start on this, and it took him all that head start, about sort of 3 months or more to do that. So
the thing with illustrating comics is that you have to bear in mind that it's usually a 22 page book plus cover. When you break down sort of that into working days, you have to be able to, if any of there are any budding artists in, you have to be able to do a page a day, every day, you know, every working day, without fail, month in, month out. And it's very, very easy for an artist to fall behind if they're putting a lot of work into it. Yeah.
And I mean, Derek inked his own stuff as well, so it was just very time consuming. So I mean, we'd have loved him because his covers, for me, were a real high point of Generation 2. And it would have been great for him to do more. I mean, you know, sort of, he was doing the backups. We split, to get Derek doing some stuff, what we did was we split the story into a kind of continuing story with a sort of subplot of about 6 pages. And we got Derek to do the subplot ones because he could just about manage that a month. So, okay. Towards the back. Yep.
I'm just reading this Death Head, What If He Lived? I was just wondering, you said that it was basically just Death Head. Why did you add like people like the Avengers, Namor, and other people?
Well, I mean, the concession I had to make for doing a Death's Head issue was that it was mainstream Marvel continuity. I mean, you have to understand that a lot of people here in America, outside Transformers, didn't really know Death's Head. The actual Death's Head series and the graphic novel did not get a big release here in the US. So the original Death's Head, I mean, the Death's Head 2 was more well known, but it was still a concept where I think it would have hurt sales not to be able to bump it up by saying, you know, features the death of big name Marvel characters in it as well. And also, it was kind of a lot of fun bumping those heroes up as well. Front?
I was just wondering, after all you did with him in the original series, how at the end of Generation 2 could you bring yourself to kill off Nightwing?
Well, I don't have a good answer for you. I mean, I like Nightbeat as well, but it was too easy just to say, well, I'll kill off all the incidental characters, all the ones I don't like. And I just thought it added to the bigger picture that, you know, sort of some of the favourites got it in the neck as well. I mean, it's just like, you know, so-and-so, you know, sort of rat track or something, you know, sort of dies, and it's like, who cares? I do love Beast Wars as well, but no. What I'm saying is, it's too easy to sort of knock off B-list characters, and I just felt it was more to add in a few that I would sort of miss as well.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, what's your opinion on the whole Beast Wars?
Well, with Beast Wars, we haven't got Beast Wars in the UK, because we still haven't, and
we have electricity and running water.
Only just. So when we were introduced to the concept of Beast Wars, it was entirely new, and you know, we didn't even realise it was all CGI until we saw the first tape of stuff. And I have to say, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I was sceptical of another Transformers series, especially since it seemed so far removed from the original. But I mean, the episodes I've seen, I've really enjoyed, and you know, they've managed to come up, I think, through necessity with some really good, deep characters for their leads. I mean, I think because they've got a limited playing field of characters, certainly for the first series, they had to develop good, deep characters, and they did so well. And I mean, I think the CGI stuff is quite breathtaking. So yeah, I think it's a definite thumbs up. I mean, Andy, do you have an opinion on this?
Beast Wars, yeah, I think it's really, really good. I mean, when Glenn, one of the organisers of this convention, first rang me up last year and asked if we'd be interested to get involved with it, and he said about, you know, doing some illustrations for the box and the comic and all that kind of thing. As Simon said, we weren't aware of Beast Wars in England at all, so he sent us over a tape of some of the episodes, and it was, wow, it's just incredible. So yeah, I think it's really good, and I think that one of the good things about it is that it would have been, to bring Transformers back and to use that kind of current technology has just put it into a completely different league, I think, which has made it more popular than it would have been, I guess, if it would have been straightforward cell animation. So yeah, it's very, very impressive.
It was good fun to do the comic as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mr. Furman, clearly your style is very different from that of Bob the I was wondering, how hard was it to mesh your own vision with his own,
Well, it's a similar answer because I'd already been doing it with the UK version. We could not have them jar too much because for the UK readers it was a continuing story. You know, it's supposed to be seamless, it wasn't, but and so I'd already got used to Bob's style, and you know, sort of Bob's stuff gave me enough sort of outtakes, bits he hadn't really explored to run with, and I just felt that he'd left that fairly well at the end of his run as well. You know, there was nothing particularly set up that I couldn't just ignore. So I mean, Bob's stuff was fine, and you know, it was just different to the way I'd have approached it and did. So I mean, yeah, there was enough. I didn't feel I had to really sort of stick too hard to what Bob had established.
Over the way. With the ponytail.
You see that?
I saw it when you turn around to say, what, me?
I really enjoyed what you did with Grimlock in the waning issues of the original series. And then G2, I just thought you really rounded out his character and like one of my characters in the comic book. Seeing how this product would be a continuation of Generation 2, at least in comic book form, can you give us like some idea what you had in store for something past issue 12 as far as the storyline?
Well, I mean, again, we knew the fate of Generation 2 quite a way before, you know, sort of issue 12 actually ever came out. So whatever storylines I'd begun or thought start to ponder, there was just no point after a while. So really, beyond the end of the Swarm stuff, apart from sort of the odd subplot, I'd never really got onto where it was going to go from there. So, I mean, it would have been lovely too, but there was just no point in the end to sort of plot out a great new story arc when we would have no chance. And not fair to leave sort of cliffhanger, you know, real cliffhangers, when we knew that was pretty much it. So there was no real sort of planned progression. And like I say, I just thought I'd leave it on a kind of, you know, sort of slight teaser that there's maybe more to come if we ever did get a chance. But I had no firm plans beyond that, except that it would have had to be even bigger and better than sort of what had come before.
And there's always the possibility, I guess, with G2 that it could have been given a further lease of life rather than just an initial 12-issue series. I mean, G1 was, as we all know, was a 4-issue series. It's the tagline at the top of number 80. Yeah.
I'm sorry if you've already answered this question, but after your experience on this comic book for BotCon, would you be interested in doing a series and having been approached for the current line of Transformers?
Well, as yet, we don't know whether there is going. We presume there is going to be a series at some point, but as yet, there's been no sort of firm commitment from any comic company. And I believe Hasbro are in discussions with someone, but we don't know. Would we do it? Hey, yeah. You know,
Yeah.
It would be great fun to do again. But until we have a comic publisher, there is no sort of, you know, there's no point sort of just sort of generally sort of sending out a flyer to all the comic companies and saying, we'll do it. But
if you were given the opportunity, would you tie it in with the old with the old line?
I think to start off with, we'd have to be heedful of what Hasbro wanted us to do with it, and what the comic company involved wanted us to do with it. If we get, like the original Transformers, an extended lease of life, then I think we would be able to pull in Generation 1 material. I mean, as much as it was hinted that the Beast Wars animated series is going to be pulling in some Generation 1 threads, you know, probably by the time there is a comic book, we would have more latitude to do so. I mean, I'd love to do so, but we would be bound about what the comic company and Hasbro wanted.
If you know, I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be up to Hasbro, whichever comic company picked up a license. I mean, whether they would ask us to do it or not, you just don't know.
Normally the first generation comics was cut short. What did you have planned for that? I heard it would go up to 100. What did you have planned for that 20 issue?
Well, I backtracked on some of my plans for the first series, in as much as I was going to destroy Cybertron at the end of the first series and have them basically need of a new homeworld, which would have put them out into a sort of a, if you like, a sort of second Cybertron, and you know, so on from there. But it was so half-formed, this idea, that really I had no sort of concrete storylines. It was just a matter of, yes, I have a long-distance goal about where I'd like to go with this. But whereas it all kind of happened, I think, condensed into about 3 issues, you know, kind of like, it looked like it was going to sort of shake apart, and then it just didn't, kind of. It was going to be a lot more sort of involved, and there were going to be lots of story arcs within the ongoing storyline of the search for a new homeworld. You know, I mean, if in the end we actually destroyed Cybertron, or whether it, you know, sort of it did heal itself as it did in the sort of the series we did, you know, remained to be seen. But we never got a chance to explore that story arc. So,
if I remember rightly, I mean, we were literally told that we'd got like 2 or 3 issues left, weren't we? It was that close to the wire. I mean, up till that point, we thought that it was going to carry on running. So, you know, Simon had suddenly got what ideas he had got, was probably projected, I don't know, 4 or 6 issues or something like that. Wrap it up in 2, boys.
I mean, you know, the return of Optimus Prime would have been more protracted as well. It just, you know, sort of, he just had to come back within an issue or two.
Yeah, baseball.
You mentioned issues of continuity and basically what you can do to a certain extent is dictated by who's basically paying your check and holding the copyright. In writing the series and having been writing or creating where it's going to go, did you ever at times watch like the cartoons and stuff to try to make sure that you were maintaining any kind of continuity with it? Because there seems to be a lot of inconsistencies there.
I realised early on there was very little point trying to marry things up with the cartoon series, because it had taken such, well, certainly by the time I came onto the US book, the two were so sort of drastically different in their just setup. I mean, same characters, but very different takes on the characters, very different storylines. But I did try and sort of take the movie as sort of a gospel and work from that, so that it wasn't Unicron, etc. You know, so there was no way I was trying to ignore the animated stuff. I just thought it was going to be far too convoluted and sort of far too much like sort of a, you know, again, a what if or else world explanation to say why there have been 2 sort of sets of stories running. So it just seemed simpler to focus on the comic as the comic and not try and tie it to the animated.
It probably would have created insurmountable problems to tie the book with the animated series, because when you've got two ongoing series within different media at the same time, Simon would have had to have known in advance where the animated series was going, and the comic would have ended up as a very kind of bits and pieces kind of affair. So to cast yourself free from the animated series was probably the best thing for Simon, because then he was allowed to write this kind of space opera that he'd got into. You know. You all ended up with a better book.
God, you're doing so well.
Is there a particular reason why the UK comics got to have US comics and more? Like why they got to have so many more comics?
It's the setup of comics in the UK. Transformers was weekly in the UK, so there just literally wasn't enough US material coming out. We were running fairly tight to the US production over here, so we had to more or less take breaks to allow the US to get ahead of us again. So, because with the weekly we were bringing out 4 comics to there every one, and even though UK Transformers episodes were 11 pages as opposed to 22, we still had to pad the month out. So, I mean, it worked out great for me, but I mean, it just meant we had to be kind of, because sometimes we would be in a state where we were so close to what we'd seen of the American material that we didn't know where Bob was going to go from where we'd sort of broken the story. So we had to sort of be creative with what we did, in as much as, you know, we couldn't, if we involved a character, say we sort of the Dinobots, we had to make sure that the Dinobots weren't different to how they'd been at the beginning of our story arc. You know, we had to leave the status quo fairly unchanged, which is why I latched onto the future stuff so much, because the US comics never sort of took from that at all. So we could do whole story arcs with future characters, and we know that we could bump them off or leave them on Earth, and they were just absent from the storyline.
Does that make sense? I didn't understand that. The market's so much smaller. The thing with the UK is that, I mean, there's just the market is so small that the British comic book market survives on reprinting, or to an extent survives on reprinting American stuff. That if it was all originated stuff, they wouldn't be able to afford to do it because the sales numbers are just not there. Yeah, baseball can.
There were allusions to the Storm of Generation 1, actually one single allusion. Were you planning on, this is on the Swarm, were you planning on bringing that in?
It was one of my sort of, well, that's a sort of, you know, a big threat looming on the horizon, but I don't quite know what it is yet. So it was just something that I did pick up on in Generation 2, but when it was introduced in Generation 1, I had no firm idea of what sort of shape or form it was going to be.
Yeah.
How much creative control do you have, and how much influence did Hasbro have?
On both UK and US, certainly Generation 1 stuff, Hasbro rarely interfered at all. I mean, we would introduce the new toys they wanted, but generally Hasbro were great. They just kind of like let us run with it, and as licensed book goes, it was a joy, because I mean, I don't think we even particularly more than just sort of sent them, you know, a rough idea of what was coming up. You know, they just tended to see the finished up work, and as far as I know, they never objected to anything. I mean, Hasbro were actually pretty good sports. I mean, we kind of G'd them up one time by playing an April Fool gag on them and sending them a story draft of a story where basically everybody dies. And at first they kind of thought we were serious, and we got this sort of kind of politely worded, but sort of, don't dare do this. But when we sort of pointed out that the fact was dated April 1st, they took it in good spirits.
There were probably more restrictions from Marvel as a comic company than there were from Hasbro. Hasbro, like Simon said, adopted this very hands-off approach because they were obviously happy with what he was writing. The only real restrictions that I was aware of, certainly from an artist's point of view, were the ones that Marvel set up, which applied to most of their books anyway, i.e. you couldn't show, well, I was going to say you couldn't show red blood, but it was oil anyway, but you can't show blood, you can't show decapitations, you can't show entry and exit wounds. To an extent, you get away with that with Transformers because they're not human, but those were some of the restrictions. But as far as I know, they were the only ones.
Having said that, though, I think we did an awful lot to Transformers, really. I mean, we took great liberties with probably what was acceptable to Hasbro, but they were fine.
Yeah, right.
How did the two of you break into comics?
Oh, right.
Rewind. With me, it was a case of I was working for a publisher that did comics. I was writing editorial competitions for a wide variety of magazines, some of which were comics. It was a company that did 2000 AD, that was the Judge Dredd character, and it became clear that I had a kind of aptitude for the comics side of things. So it was an easy step to move on to being editor on one of these comics, and then to pick up script writing work from there. And from there I moved to Marvel UK, which is just about when they started doing Transformers. So it was kind of, again, I just sort of arrived at the right time.
I just slept with everybody who was relevant.
This is rather disturbing because I was the commissioning editor.
No, I mean, like some of you here, I never really wanted to do anything else. First comic I picked up was Avengers number 44 with the Red Guardian. I don't know if anyone remembers that, but no, you're probably younger than me. But yeah, I never wanted to do anything else, so just, drawing samples over and over again, get the portfolio together and take it around the publishers. I did the first thing that I did in comics was it was a one-off comic with involving a licensed character called Brave Star. It was kind of like a space opera. Yeah, it was terrible. But I did that and took the samples of those to Marvel UK, and a couple of editors gave me bits and pieces of work, and Simon was one of those, and just eventually one thing led to another. The American break for me came because Simon was working in an editorial capacity with, you might correct me on this, but I think because he was working as an editor at Marvel UK, he had to have contact with Marvel US over what was happening in Transformers because they were reprinting the American stuff. So he was the obvious choice to be the writer when they needed a new writer on the American book. When they then needed a new artist on the American book, Simon sort of suggested to them that he knew any number of artists who had got Transformers experience. Jeff Senior was one of those, and I initially was asked. Actually, they asked me to do some sample pages because they'd seen my work and thought it would be okay. So I did 2 sample pages and they turned me down. But the 2 sample pages I did, I followed their guidelines and made them very sort of rigid characters. When they gave me a second shot at it, I just thought, well, I'll just go for broken and do what I do best, and made them more sort of animated and had more expression. And they seemed to kind of like that, so they gave me the book. But initially I was only going to fill in on 4 issues because Jeff Senior was doing the Death Set graphic novel. But Jeff had moved, by the time it came to that point, Jeff had moved on and they just gave me the book anyway, so there you go. Yeah.
Mr. Wildman, who are your artistic influences? And Mr. Furman, what plans did you have for the Liege Maximo?
You can go first while I think about it.
No, you think this first. I'll think to an answer to this question.
Okay, very sort of roughly, I guess, in order. John Buscema, Barry Smith, John Buscema, Barry Smith, John Buscema, Barry Smith, and Jim Lee. I mean, the thing is that if you want to draw comics, the one thing that any comic book artist would tell you is that the one thing you should not do is to narrow all your influences down to comic book artists. It's the same as writing as well. The best way to actually bring in, I think comics have gone a little bit stale. They're very entertaining and visually very dramatic, but they're not really moving very far forward, apart from publishing arms like Vertigo, who are kind of pushing the boundaries a bit. So the only way for new people to come into the industry and actually offer something new to further the industry are those kind of people who have such diverse influences that they will bring something in new. So in terms of influences, it's as well to look at everything from classical art through to modern art, films, whatever, and real people. Comics are mostly people apart from Transformers, so if you can draw real people, you're kind of halfway there, really.
Well, thanks for all that time to think of an answer.
You still haven't thought.
I don't think I had many plans at all, so I'm afraid that's my best answer on that one.
Yeah. Do either of you have any projects upcoming? Like any notable projects?
No. Well, basically, as you probably know, Marvel, as well as some other publishers, not so much with DC, I guess, because they are owned by a large corporation, but Marvel have been through drastic changes. The last continuing run on a book I did for Marvel was Spider-Man 2099, which I think was the best part of the year's work for me. And they actually took me off that book for various political reasons, involving other artists who were working within the 2099 stable and the kind of contracts they'd got. So I had to be taken off of that book. One of the editors, the other editors at Marvel was a guy called Neil Yontov, who coloured every single issue of Transformers G1, which was incredible. And he's a really nice guy, and he really bent over backwards to find me some work to do, because Marvel were cutting back so much. They ended up by getting rid of something like 2/3 of their editorial staff. And so the editors were not giving out work, they were worried about their own job. But Nell gave me some pages in the penultimate issue of Forceworks and the whole of the last issue of Forceworks. And then I did one issue of Fantastic Four Unplugged. But after that, I came away from comics anyway, because there was just so much crap going on within the industry that it was a good time to duck out of it. So I've been doing other things. I mean, I've been doing business storyboarding, advertising work, all sorts of stuff. Keeping my hand in with some comic stuff for British comics, but nothing of any great consequence.
I mean, having said all that, we have put together a pitch that we're taking around to comic companies while we're over here, so
yeah,
fingers crossed.
We're both in Manhattan next week, and we've got some ideas of approaching DC with, so you never know. Yeah.
For Simon, what was your first opinion when you found out about Nucleon, and did you have to incorporate it? And when you did incorporate it, how long did you have to make a fantastic story out of something so limited?
Well, I mean, the whole concept of Action Masters was a pretty naff one. I mean, I have to say. I mean, it was just so bizarre. But I mean, you had to sort of make, sort of the best of the work that you could. So I mean, you did just try and, find new ways to make something uninteresting interesting. But it was no worse or better than some of the other ones they'd come up with. So it's like. Little ones. I don't know. I mean, let's put it this way. I thought a lot of the, sort of original stuff was great, but they were stretching a concept a bit towards the end with their toy range. Just a personal opinion, but it's one I felt very much having to deal with a lot of these characters and Micro Masters and Action Masters. It just seemed kind of
Showing.
Yeah. That's the way.
You incorporated one of the Action Masters, Croc, as Legends' right-hand man. Did you get anything from Hasbro as far as Croc is concerned, or did you totally have to make up his story with his importance to Legend?
I don't know, did we have bios for them? I mean, I would have thought we had. I mean, I don't think we introduced any characters that didn't already come with biographies and details from Hasbro. I mean, I just don't think they let us. I mean, we could do sort of peripheral characters, but the actual Transformers themselves had to have established history. So, I mean, without being able to sort of hold up a bit of paper and say, yes, here it is, I'm fairly certain that all those ones, Bludgeon and Croc, all those ones came with their potted histories already intact.
They also make a Last Autobot, I think. Pretty good. Yeah.
So what is Zaron hurt?
Sorry?
The gold guy,
in one of the UK stories, we had him transform into a sort of kind of sleek hover car type thing, but we just never got around to showing this in the US version. I mean, I think we only did it once in the UK one, more or less, was just a sort of a throwaway scene, just because, again, we had that same question. But,
I got the whole, I don't remember when he did it.
It's a UK annual story, which you might not have, and There Shall Come a Leader, I think it was called, and it was sort of a flashback to sort of an early Optimus Prime appearance, and we had Zarin in that do his transformation bit. I think you could say that by the time we get to see him in the main continuity, he was that old that he was like, a bit of an effort to transform. So we never did.
Is oil running? Yeah.
Since you're both artist types, I was kind of wondering what aspects of other creators' works do you like? What, for instance, for Mr. Furman, what story parts or aspects of story do you admire in other people's writings? And what aspects of other people's art do you admire in other people's drawings? Sort of split those.
With me, it's very much I like somebody who doesn't sort of sacrifice the story just for action. I've always, sort of been a big sort of maintainer of that you can't just have fight after fight after fight. You need, sort of character sort of depth. You need subplot. You need character development. You just need sort of so many more elements to keep something interesting. And I admire writers who can do that and do it effortlessly. People like Alan Moore, Frank Miller, they never sacrifice character for action, and I admire that more than anything.
Artistically, with British comics, they're put together differently. They're completely scripted from the beginning, whereas American comics, sort of a story breakdown is written. So with a British comic, you have to write exactly what some crazy megalomaniac sort of writer has actually written, which very often is not possible to do. No, I mean, if they're a writer of any kind of vision, they've seen this thing anyway, and you're sort of interpreting that. With American books, you're given a breakdown of what the story is going to be, and you can then interpret that visually in any way you like, within reason. The result of that is that I think, almost without knowing it, I think British artists develop a very, very keen sense of storytelling because they're tied to that. They have to develop an ability to portray the things that are required to portray. There was a tendency before some people broke away from Marvel and went on their own to do books which were just full of sort of pin-up pages and not much else. And it was all just in your face sort of graphics. So there are a lot of artists, as a result of that, who then came onto the scene who thought that the way to put together a good comic is to just have impressive visuals all the time. The thing that I like about comics, the thing that really impresses me is when I read a comic which has really good storytelling, because that's what they're there for. Yeah.
Why don't you make your own company?
Why don't we make our own yourself? Don't have any money yet.
If you want to chip in on the way out,
We'll be passing a hat around.
It takes a considerable outlay. I mean, it would be a lovely idea, but you need sort of like the royalties from an ex-book, sort of for a few times to set. I mean, the Image Comics people.
I had some of those and spent them.
The Image Comics people did it on the back of some very big selling comics and some very large royalty checks. And unfortunately, without that sort of base, or without sort of some financial backers willing to take a real chance, it's just not going to happen. It's a lovely idea, but
I mean, while we're talking about money, just to be really obscene about this, not that I'm bitter or anything. Marvel's basic royalty payment, they pay you per page. There's like a standard page rate, which is adjusted. Different artists get paid different rates depending on either how popular they are or how long they've been in the industry. But there's a basic rate structure. On top of that, a few years ago, I think the royalty rate was something like $25 a set? No, 25. I can't remember. 200,000. A sale of 200,000 would get. I'm losing track here. Hang on a minute. X-Men Adventures #1 sold 500,000 copies, which was a lot, hell of a lot at the time, because there was so much. There was fever pitch sort of building up, and people just wanted to score #1. It nosedived after that, I can tell you. But X-Men Adventures #1 sold 500,000 copies. I got about $11,000 royalties on that one issue. Jim Lee, who was one of the people who set up Image, his X-Men book, the first issue, as you probably know, sold 8.2 million. That's the kind of money you need to set up a comic book. So work it out for yourself. And we haven't got that kind of money. Yeah.
Both of you, what would be the character you most like to write, draw, whatever? Who would you like to do the most?
What generally out of everybody ever?
Any comics character, any company, anyone.
For me, it's Spider-Man because Spider-Man I grew up with, and I would love to have a sort of run on Spider-Man just to sort of have a go at the character. Although these days, because they have sort of so many books, it's very much a team sort of effort writing each month. But I mean, I would love to write Spider-Man for a bit. But if I had the choice of a character, I'd bring Death's Head back.
My favourites, I think. I don't know. Spider-Man was always my favourite as I was growing up, I guess. And I did a 6-issue Spider-Man series. I did Spider-Man 2099. That's not saying anything. But the thing I didn't like about doing those was that he has like a full face mask, so you can't see him dribble, and you can't see him. No, I mean I really like to do facial expressions on characters. So that, in terms of drawing, that's probably not necessarily the best one. I would love to do Thor. That would be really cool. I'd love to do Thor. Yes, you.
I like you talked about storytelling, and I thought one of the really good books that, or it's not anymore, but was Neil Gaiman's Sandman. I was wondering what you think, and what are your favorite books? Like just to see, it seems like you have a similar thing, Transformers and all. Good storytelling.
Well, I mean, I like the Sandman. I think the Sandman is great, and I like a certain number of the Vertigo books at the moment. Some of the better ones like Preacher and the occasional other guy, Garth Ennis writes. I also like Kurt Busiek's Astro City, which I think is a very good. Again, it comes down to I like a good story, and so sort of if it's well written, I'll tend to read it myself.
I like Calvin and Hobbes. Yeah.
Any parting thoughts before we turn this over to the autograph cabinet?
Oh, boo. Anyone else?
Gillian Anderson.
That's a good passing thought.
Yeah, I'll take that away with me fine. Thank you.
What t-shirt is that, Simon?
Sorry?
What t-shirt is that?
This is a character. Actually, this is a character that I co-created called Hit Blast. Who actually doesn't really exist outside of various promotional things we've done. He was created with a company, a guy called Richard Starkings, who runs Comic Craft, a lecturing firm, and who did the Beast Wars comic. The lecturing, yeah. And he and I just came up with a character concept of just this sort of hippopotamus who's a private eye. Just more or less as a sort of, an idea that we could start this whole ball rolling without actually ever doing a comic strip. We've done sort of kind of one-off or two-off pages. We did a Christmas card. We've got various artists to draw bits of Hit Blast. So, one of these days we hope there's going to be a Hit Blast comic.
And tell them who drew that one, Simon.
This is a Brian Bolland's original.
I'll see you over there. I don't know. I'm wearing a Venom t-shirt. No, I'm not. I'm saying, I'm wearing a t-shirt with the logo of my band. There you go. I don't play any instrument, I play the drums.
And on that'll definitely wrap it up, I think.
Session, but if everybody could calmly and orderly, because everybody here will get an autograph and a photograph, start a line over to the right-hand side, whichever side this is. And if there's anybody with special physical needs, if you could come to the front, you will be taken care of first. Thank you.
Absolutely. they don't have exactly much house at all. I know the people in the studio.
We'll probably, there's some people here.
Okay. Thanks very much. Thanks a lot.
That is my first ever.
That's why I picked that one, actually. Yeah.
Yes, it's my very first one.
This is like 2 out of the whole set.
And it's an absolute wince-worthy story. It really is awful.
Ah, well, hey. I picked a better one for you, then. Is this your first appearance of Death Sentence?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that is a fine film.
You don't want me on this one, do you?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very well.
Thank you.
So Pete gave me a really hard time over this.
Yeah. Could I possibly use a photograph with my taking with myself and both of you? I'll just duck over here because
something. Nice to meet you.
That they likes that. Yeah, they got the other ones. They
This is thicker.
Thanks a lot.
Don't want me on that, please.
Oh, I would.
It's not an opportunity to have it. It's more important than the autograph.
It's obviously set.
You never see stuff like that for Wildman.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, guys. I like how the cameraman was taking a picture of you.
We can see the reflection in his eyes.
I
love that.
I play the drums. I'm a piano player who's moving into percussion myself, so there's nothing wrong.
No, I just say that before other people do. See, what do they call people who hang around with musicians and drummers?
Enjoying yourself?
Yeah. Are you guys enjoying your trip away?
Yeah, it's great fun.
Usually in Stanford or are you in the States?
No, we're
I got love beside this.
Hey, you guys cheated.
We're just kind of waiting for her up. Nope. Yeah, you're right.
Ready?
Like a repainted area tracks.
Want to keep holding this? Yeah. It's got my address there if you want to keep it. This? Yes.